Chapter 2: How to Drive Coherence and Quality. Three key areas will be described in how to develop strategy and engagement. 1. Getting the right people on the bus, to quote Jim Collins. 2. The leader's role in strategy. And 3. Leading by example. Through the execution of these elements of leadership, your team will become more cohesive and have a sense of coherence with respect to the goals the organization is pursuing. This cohesiveness and coherence are inspiring and result in an increase in energy level from the team. 2.1. Getting the right people on the bus. Let's start with the complete quote from Jim Collins' great book that is a must-read, Good to Great. Quote, "Those who build great organizations make sure they have the right people on the bus and the right people in the key seats before they figure out where to drive the bus. They always think first about who and then about what. When facing chaos and uncertainty, and you cannot possibly predict what's coming around the corner, your best strategy is to have a busload of people who can adapt and perform brilliantly no matter what comes next. Great vision without great people is irrelevant." End quote. The organizational values level of analysis is critical, and one of the things to analyze and codify is the definition of behaviors that support organizational values. A useful way of analyzing behavior is through the use of a golden mean type of approach where there is an optimum, an excess, and a deficiency defined. Excerpted in the table below is part of our behavioral analysis. Table 1, Golden Mean Behaviors and Supporting Values. Part of the analysis not shown in the table is mapping how many of the values are supported by each behavior. The more values supported, the more important the behavior. What should be immediately apparent in the table above is that there is a major red flag around complacency. This is an uncanny valley of negative behavior around which there are several peaks of desired golden mean behavior, beyond which lie other valleys of undesirable behavior. The main driver in achieving the coherence of personal organizational alignment is to get the right people on the bus in the first place, and this is accomplished through a rigorous and efficient screening process guided by the explicitly defined organizational behaviors and values. This is accomplished through behavioral interviewing, a valuable tool with a standard script of questions. Potential fit should be prioritized over past experience. Someone that checks all the experience boxes but does not align with at the values level will inevitably suffer with poor engagement and likely stagnate within the organization, risking becoming cancerous and engaging in counterproductive behaviors. Interviewers are trained to spot desirable and undesirable behaviors. A great addition, especially for senior hires, is a multi-part case study focused on leadership that tests for manifestations of the four dimensions of beliefs, spiritual, disposition, emotional, aptitude, mental, level of fortitude, physical. Behaviors can also reveal motivators and demotivators. In our engineering services organization, a senior technical leader was being interviewed and was asked, "How would you feel about mentoring and teaching younger engineers?" To which he responded, "I suppose it's a burden I could bear." Interview over. He was not going to be productive or satisfied in an organization that values learning together, relationships, apprenticeship, and in fact would potentially be very disruptive to the functioning of a team. There is a high likelihood that this person will not share their expertise and knowledge, at best grudgingly allowing younger people to ask questions, stunting their development. When surrounded by other people in the organization that value and rely on sharing, no one will want to work with this individual. They will become increasingly isolated and likely resentful, leading to a downward spiral. If, on the other hand, the organization was oriented towards hyper-individualism, some firms are collections of only experienced people poached from other organizations, there is no program in place for development of junior staff, and assignments do not require support of younger people. This person could have been a perfectly good hire. This is not a judgment on the worth of this individual as a human being. He was a really nice guy. He simply will not be able to function well in our environment. In modern service organizations where change is constant, it is necessary to have an organization composed of continuous learners. People who are motivated and energized by learning and sharing what they know. People who geek out for fun. The importance of demotivators and grievance cannot be overstated. Human beings will become highly demotivated when they feel aggrieved. Not everyone gets aggrieved equally. You need to ask yourself, what are the commonplace occurrences in our organization that may make a candidate feel aggrieved? And then craft questions to root out a tendency to excessive grievance. It is desirable to weed out people who have an excessive tendency to behave in an aggrieved way in response to these occurrences for which you have no control. In the service industry, a thick skin is needed, and the service provider is often going to be on the receiving end of unjust criticism and quote-unquote unfair situations, quote-unquote unfair schedules. What is needed are people who do not dwell on this quote-unquote injustice and instead roll up their sleeves to get it done. The desirable candidates will understand that they have agency, roll with the punches, and that within the injustice are opportunities. The highly aggrieved will tend to foment discord among their colleagues, which can be highly damaging and typically is done in a very passive-aggressive way that can go unnoticed. This is cancerous, and as with cancer, once it sets in, it will be difficult to remedy. This should be a lens in deciding who you want in your organization to ensure that they will be capable of being high-functioning in your environment. If they feel put out when criticized by a client, they do not belong in the service industry, and you are not doing them any favors by bringing them into your organization. That said, client selection must also be done in alignment with company values. If we value relationships, clients that are truly toxic should be fired. Obviously, economic realities will come into play. Another anecdote comes to mind. We had a client that represented 1/6 of our business, and several of our staff were deeply integrated into their team. We were starting to see more turnover in that team, and when conducting exit interviews, it became clear that there was a problem with the behavior of the leadership in the client organization. Our leadership met with the client leadership and expressed that the business relationship was not working and that if we wished it to continue, mediation would be needed. The client chose not to pursue mediation, and the business relationship was wound down in an orderly fashion. Essentially, we found a way to diplomatically fire the client. The spike in our staff's turnover stopped, and we more than picked up business elsewhere. It is especially important to ruthlessly eliminate narcissists from candidacy and from within the organization. The narcissist will tend to fall into the above trap around grievance and be thoroughly cancerous. Due to the broader social environment of addiction to social media and a look-at-me culture, pedestalizing vapid celebrities rather than accomplishment and competency, we are living in an era of rapidly rising narcissism. Organizations that can keep narcissism out will have the competitive advantage of a higher functioning team. Furthermore, when new members of an organization are onboarded, their behaviors should be keenly observed and considered when deciding whether they will stay past their probationary period. Obviously, this is in addition to what types of results are being achieved, but results alone are not enough. In most organizations, arrogant jerks are toxic to the people around them, as will be shown later. Onboarding is discussed in more detail later on. Lastly, regarding recruiting, it is more important to recruit for potential than past experience. HR departments are typically going to filter candidates based on past experience directly related to the current job. Some of our best performers came from other industries with seemingly irrelevant experience. Really bright people recognize analogies from another market or industry and then bring in new ideas on better ways of doing things. Even though we were focused on life sciences, we had stellar recruits, including future owners who came to us from other industries, including automotive, petrochemical, and nuclear. Typical HR practice of looking at relevant experience would have excluded these stars. Some example questions we use to great effect are summarized in the table below. Table 2, example interview questions. Question, are you a lucky person? Explanation. We're checking for grievance. If someone thinks they are unlucky, it is likely they have a victim mindset. Maybe they really are unlucky. Who wants a black cloud like that in your organization? Question, have you ever failed to reach a goal? Explanation. In engineering, we learn from our own and from the failures of others. We are all human and have all failed. To the narcissist, failures are never theirs, but the result of the failings of others. We are testing for humility here and self-honesty. It could be possible with new grads that they have not experienced failure. Do you want their first failure to be on your watch? Maybe, but then you know to watch out and be on alert for specific coaching in this area. Question. Give an example of a time you faced adversity. Explanation. Here we are testing for perseverance, that they will be resourceful when times get tough, their stick-to-itiveness. Question. What does having your professional engineering license mean to you? Here we are again testing for humility and a sense of service. The major red flag answer on this is if they answer that it is all about recognition or status. It most certainly is not. This license is about a commitment to protecting public safety and to the profession. It is about service and obligation. For us, this is a do not hire red flag. Question. Do you have any questions for us? Explanation. If they don't, they are not really that interested and have not prepared for the interview. We have a company value of exploration. We want people who are curious and want to know more to master their craft. A lack of curiosity and a lack of preparedness is a major red flag. Interviewing is a very important skill, and it is important that the interviewer not only be skilled in building rapport with the interviewee, but also to have a deep understanding of what the organization is looking for in the candidate, not only for the position being applied to, but for other potential positions. The interviewers, especially the hiring line managers, need to understand the point of the questions being asked. A big part of how we make sense of the world is through the telling of stories. Tribal cultures transmitted wisdom through the telling of stories. Holy books of most religions are full of story-based morality tales. People in the organization, especially those in any type of leadership role, need to be able to tell stories. The questions above ought to evoke storytelling from the interviewee. One of my favorite technical stories is a tale of one of my failures as a young engineer. I had designed 2 tanks to be connected via a common suction header, and due to the nature of the ridged gaskets, the header had to be re-engineered during construction. I should have anticipated the need to design around this detail. The difficulty in re-engineering was mitigated as I had a really good working relationship with the contractor's foreman, and he gave me a heads up about the problem, giving me an opportunity to come up with a fix before things got really expensive. Without that good working relationship, earned through the demonstration of the respect I had for the contractor's highly skilled crew, they could simply have completed the installation, saying it's done as per the drawings, and sat back with popcorn to watch the disaster unfold later on. For me, it's a memorable experience, and in the telling of this tale, it can stick in others' memories, learning from my technical mistake and the importance of relationship building. 2.1.1 The Triple Threat: Act, Sing, Dance. The idea of the triple threat that can act, sing, and dance is useful for the young leader looking to progress their development and for senior leaders looking to fill a pipeline of future leaders. What this means in practice is becoming skilled enough in 3 areas. 1, the actual work of the business, manufacturing, the service the organization provides, etc. 2, sales and marketing. 3, business administration. For the young leader, if you want to progress to full organizational leadership, you will need to get experience in all 3 of these areas. You will build a skill stack and learn different languages. Yes, the dancers, actors, and singers speak different languages, and to be able to lead a whole organization, you will need to learn them to be able to effectively communicate across these tribes. For the senior leader, keep an eye out for young people that exhibit capabilities to become a triple threat and work with them to develop it. Get people on the bus who are capable of becoming triple threats. The triple threat that can excel at all 3 is a bit of a unicorn and highly prized. However, more common and still very effective is someone who is excellent at one and good enough at the other 2. This later case can still rise to becoming a very effective senior leader within the organization, perhaps leading a division. Not everyone is a future CEO, and that's a good thing. We need capable leaders at all levels in the organization. 2.2 Strategy. The development and implementation of strategy is the most important accountability and responsibility of the leader and of leaders in general. Does this mean the leader does strategic planning in isolation in their ivory tower? No, except in very small organizations. The strategic planning process should be consultative with the entire organization and at minimum involve the leader's immediate team. Organizational strategy includes, at a minimum, the following elements: codification of values, definition of mission, high level description of a goal and how you will get there. I love Tesla's to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. Detailing of vision. This includes a high level summary vision statement that will tend to be qualitative and a more granular and quantitative detailed description of the future. 4. Planning of objectives, goals, and their supporting actions, including planning and creation of supporting infrastructure. For some, especially new, small service organizations, minimal to no effort has gone into codification of values, mission, and vision. It cannot be emphasized enough how important this is. We fell into this trap in the first 10 years of our business. We were almost solely focused on getting and doing work with our senior most leaders, too focused on working in the business rather than on the business. We had made some fluffy notions of a 10-point vision of where we wanted to be in a few years, but had no clarity on mission and values other than a mission statement of value and service to clients. There was nothing wrong with value and service, and we took it to heart and did great work for our clients, delivering again and again. One of the major contributing factors to a major positive inflection point about 10 years into our history was good strategic planning, which started with codification of values and mission. There is a mountain of literature on this topic, and commentary here will be limited. For the engineering service firms, PSMJ's Ultimate AE Strategic Planning Manual is a must-have resource. The use of a skilled third-party facilitator is extremely valuable in the strategic planning process. Mintzberg provides a good critique of the more rigid strategic planning process that many organizations have adopted. Mintzberg argues that vision should not be overly detailed and that strategy is a synthesis process that cannot be forced. That strategy is, in a way, emergent from people's creative energies. We had success in forcing this process through the collection of information by our facilitators from our staff and clients, and consolidating this information into a required reading report prior to the formal planning retreat. The leaders at the planning retreat then had time to independently synthesize ideas around what strategies were available for pursuit and merited planning. The synthesis of strategy is something that requires a rested mind that has time for reflection. A leader should regularly schedule themselves time to read and reflect. Going into a planning retreat, the team should not be in an exhausted state. The third-party facilitator should be provided with the latitude to keep the leader in check during the planning session. The leader should be doing a lot of listening during the planning sessions, but have veto power over things they are not in agreement with. Generally, high performers like to have autonomy, and the leader letting the rest of the leadership team make their own goals will give them a sense of autonomy and ownership over those goals and a higher level of engagement. The emotional intelligence, humility, and perseverance of the leader are important in striking the right balance in this process. Perseverance is needed to know when to rein in the supporting leadership team and impose the leader's will in setting certain key directional elements. Sometimes mother or father knows best. The strategic plan should be a living thing, adjusted and tweaked as time goes on, with occasional full-blown planning sessions to do a rewrite. The set of objectives and goals should be looked at like a battle plan, and no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, a distillation of Helmut von Moltke's The Elder's Wisdom. The planning is essential in determining the field conditions and what tactics are at hand in order to advance strategic objectives. The leader needs to read the changing field conditions and be prepared to make adjustments to their plan. The plan needs to include identification of who is accountable for what goals, and it is the responsibility of the leader to enable people to succeed by providing them the time and resources to reasonably achieve their goals, and then hold people accountable. A balance needs to be struck in not making the plan too realistic, i.e. not ambitious enough. In our experience, the way to strike this balance is by assigning priorities to the objectives and supporting goals. A lower priority goal may have no effort assigned, but in the event of changing field conditions, a reprioritization may be appropriate. The planning process is essential to this. The best example of our strategic plan getting a major adjustment was when the COVID lockdowns started in March 2020. A major priority in our plan was to select and deploy a new ERP system. We were on the verge of launching the procurement effort, having just completed defining our user requirements. In 2018 and 19, we had been lightly experimenting with hybrid work from home and office. Figuring out how to do this effectively suddenly became the priority, along with the creation of various infection control and compartmentalization strategies. We shifted gears, and then when the dust settled a year later, we restarted the ERP procurement. The ERP procurement, when put on hold, was not at a high level of urgency, but we were anticipating that by 2022, our accounting, timesheet, and project management systems would no longer be scalable. We ended up deploying the ERP in time to avert a bottleneck. Had we not done the original planning around the ERP, we would likely have ended up in a painful crisis situation. An essential part of strategic planning is the communication of the strategic plan to the team. This is a part of leading with clarified intent, Kish 2018, and is key to empowering people. They know what the objectives are, and possibly the broad strokes of how. They know what tools and resources are available, and they get it done without being micromanaged, i.e., with as high a degree of autonomy as possible. This will then enable the entire team to identify opportunities that can be seized to facilitate the achievement of strategic objectives. This is one of Eric Kish's 3 things that are needed to create and run a scalable organization. 1. Clarified intent. 2. Optimized talent. And 3. Disciplined rituals. His book 5 to 50 to 500 is a must-read for the leader who wants to scale their organization up. A key concept that Kish presents towards clarifying intent is that of the organization playbook. And there are essentially 3 playbooks as summarized in the table below. It is important that you know which one you will be dominant in your organization, and that you are only good enough in the other 2. This fits well into the idea of bringing coherence to what the organization is pursuing. Table 3, Organizational Playbooks. This table is extracted directly from Kish's work. As I have spent my entire post-university career in organizations that ran from the customer intimacy playbook, this handbook will be most relevant to customer intimacy organizations. A valuable tool Kish suggests is the strategic map. A similar and simpler version is an objectives tree, Baird, 1983. An excerpt of the one we used is shown below. These can be prepared at differing levels of granularity within the organization or in organizational subunits. The strategic map and the overall plan should be incorporated into the onboarding of new hires at an appropriate time and should be more than just a read and review. This is a key opportunity to gain alignment with the new hires and for them to know and understand what the intent is. When managing by walking around, a senior leader can and should ask people if they know how what they are working on fits into the bigger picture. Each of the boxes in the strategic map shown below can be measured and key performance indicators or metrics collected. While metrics can be useful, as discussed later in section 3.2.4, be careful what you measure. Figure 3, Strategic Map excerpt. There are many rituals that are important and happen on a much higher frequency, as much as daily. At our company, we went so far as to create values-based awards, essentially a type of ritual, which were awarded based on a peer nomination process, wherein the awards were actually presented by one of the peers who made the nomination. The morale lift from this process is tangible. The award includes some monetary remuneration for the winner and smaller amounts for all the nominees. Senior leadership is not eligible for these awards. Another form of ritual I engaged in as a frontline leader was the micro-teach. When working with a younger engineer and coming across some detailed technical aspect that was new to them, I would initiate the gathering of other people it was new to in a meeting room for an impromptu lesson. Usually there were other tangentially related areas of knowledge relevant to the work others were doing, and others would get an opportunity to contribute and speak publicly. The ritual followed the pattern of identify knowledge gap, identify others that need the lesson, gather, teach, Q&A, all no more than 15 to 20 minutes. This ritual reinforced the culture of knowledge sharing, leading by example in that regard. It works on building relationships with other people in the organization. Further elaboration on this topic will be presented in 3.1.6. A final element of strategy is the organizational chart. In a truly servant leadership driven organization, the leader should not envision themselves at the top of the heap. It is in fact the opposite. We utilized an inversion of the traditional org chart with the leader at the bottom. My mental image and conception of this, in fact, is that the organization is like a tree, with the leader acting as a trunk, past leaders as the roots. The trunk of the tree supports the branches, who are the next level of leaders, and so on to the leaves of the tree. The leaves of the tree are the ones collecting energy from the sun. Our customers are the sun, our source of life. Our job as leaders is to support them, the leaves, so they can do their jobs. It's not a perfect analogy, but it helped me. Figure 4, Servant Leader Organization Chart. When doing strategic planning, it is useful to not only look at the organizational chart of today, but of what you think you When doing strategic planning, it is useful to not only look at the organizational chart of today, but of what you think it will need to be in 5 and even 10 years' time, taking names out of positions, thinking of what structural changes will be needed as the organization grows. Then you can examine the talent pool you have for who may be good candidates for future needed roles, or you will have identified well in advance what some of your needs will be and can recruit and develop early for them. This allows you to avoid future bottlenecks and crises. Another book that must be read cover to cover is Kotter's Leading Change. This work is essential reading in providing a framework for how to effectively lead change. Concepts in Kotter's 8-step model scale up, society-wide change, and down, project execution. 1. Create a sense of urgency. 2. Build a guiding coalition. 3. Form a strategic vision. 4. Enlist a volunteer army. 5. Enable actions by removing barriers. 6. Generate short-term wins. 7. Sustain acceleration. 8. Institute change. Rather than repeat the work here, the reader is encouraged to go out and read Leading Change as soon as possible. If they already have, go and read it again. 2.2.1 Process Ownership. A lot of smaller organizations only create policies and procedures, i.e. formal processes, when problems are encountered. I did this when leading our organizations. Engineers are, believe it or not, creatives, not just a bunch of blockheads. Creatives do not like being under the yoke of overly proceduralized bureaucracy, hence the maxim of as much policy as is needed and as little as possible. In our early days, we probably took this a little too far, and the result was some processes that should have been formalized but were not, resulting in regular reinventing of the wheel and undesirable friction between people constantly having to reestablish boundaries. A fully developed process ownership paradigm is if not the, solution to this problem. Every organization will have a subset of processes that are routine, mundane, requiring little, if any, creativity to execute once they've been well defined. These processes in particular are the low-hanging fruit to assign to process owners and formalize, thereby freeing up more energy for the creative work that is more transformative in delivery of products and services to customers. Let's go back to a few definitions. A process is how things get done. It is the series of steps and actions taken on inputs to achieve a desired outcome or result. Appendix 2 discusses theoretical aspects of process leadership in more detail. In Figure 3 above, there is a band that refers to internal business processes. These processes are both formal and informal. In Figure 2, there are actions, the same actions we talk about in the sense of a process. For a process to yield the desired result, the people doing the process actions need to be competent at those actions and have enough capacity to execute all the necessary actions in the process. Process ownership is where people are identified to voluntarily own a given process. Owning a process means they are in control of it, meaning they have the authority to see that the process is followed. They have the authority to define it and improve it. Ideally, a process owner has intimate familiarity with the execution of that process. They are accountable for the outcomes of the process. The process owner can be empowered to decide on the level of formality that is needed to define the process. It could be a standard operating procedure, a workflow, a policy, a combination, or something else. The process owner will bear in mind what playbook the organization is running. An operational excellence organization will probably lean towards a more tightly defined process, whereas a client intimacy organization may define things a little more flexibly with some processes to allow for more client customization. A key process used in process leadership is process mapping. Process mapping done well is facilitated by someone who stays out of the content of the mapping exercise and helps to get a group of people to define the process. Improving a process starts with defining it, mapping it. A well-defined process will define the desired result, the necessary inputs, the context it is executed in, and especially the interfaces. As discussed in section 3.1.4, interfaces are a source of friction, and by having processes with minimal and well-defined interfaces, they will have less friction, reducing the generation of negative energy. Having in-house facilitators is good. We invested in training our project managers on facilitation and found that this made them more effective as leaders. Facilitation training is also great for instilling the servant mindset. The facilitator is essentially acting in service to the group, and successfully facilitating a group is a very satisfying experience. Organizations that are not running an operational excellence playbook should not get carried away and overdo it with respect to process mapping and definition. As in all things, finding the right balance is essential. Process ownership can serve another important function. It allows a leader to test their future leaders to see if they are ready for that promotion. It provides an incremental increase in authority, responsibility, and accountability for the future leader. This also helps in building competency. Ideally, as a leader, you will make a call to adventure for some future leaders to voluntarily take on process ownership. It can come with additional perks such as recognition at certain company functions, bonus money, or additional salary. Make it clear that for those seeking to grow and advance in the organization, process ownership is a key step. Top-down assignment of process ownership is unlikely to yield the desired results and may even breed resentment. A voluntary approach will yield people in these leadership positions who are engaged and excited about the trust you have in them. 2.3. Lead by example. Leaders at all levels in the organization need to know the company values intimately and live them out. Like it or not, as a leader, you are being watched constantly, and how you behave will be emulated by the people around you. Your energy will be emulated. The gold standard is recommended reading, Cormier, 2001. If you are being pessimistic, angry, chaotic, this negative energy will percolate out from you and infect the people around you. If you are bringing hope, optimism, joy, orderliness, and supportiveness, this positive energy will infect the people around you. The world has become increasingly chaotic, and people are looking for sources of stability. The leader should provide shade in a thirsty desert and shelter in a storm. Success in leading by example is critically important in providing a sense of coherence to your team. If you, as a leader, behave in ways that are inconsistent with the organization's values, the team will notice, and it will erode their respect for you. You are the model of behavior for people to follow. I was surprised to hear an anecdote from a female colleague that had worked at multiple other organizations where sexual harassment was commonplace, and that for the first couple of years after working with us, she was in a state of disbelief that a workplace like ours existed where women need not live in fear of the outright harassment of being grabbed, nor the uncomfortableness of being hit on by the boss. From day one, we have led by example that the workplace is no place for sexuality, full stop. We are professionals and will behave accordingly with each other. The joke she had for me is that to her, I'm a Ken doll, i.e., where the twig and berries are supposed to be, there's just smooth plastic. What this all took from a leadership perspective is scrupulously good behavior, being aware of physical boundaries, especially with female colleagues, for male leaders and vice versa. In the above colleagues' former organizations, the leaders set the example of inappropriate behavior, and it was rampant. We set a different example, and it was clear that inappropriate behavior would not be tolerated. Furthermore, was that before we instituted a lot of formal policy around this issue, this environment was created via leading by example and people doing what the leaders do. This does not mean that we do not recognize sex differences. A striking example for me is the typical masculine versus feminine response to great frustration. In life, we will encounter highly frustrating situations from time to time, and these are almost always a great opportunity for personal growth. A typical human response is for anger to set in, and here is where there is a sex based difference. Men's typical reaction to anger is to get hot with a raised voice and an aroused physicality. Think of a barking dog. While women will typically be brought to tears. Of course, this is a bit of a stereotype and not always the case. Both responses are unproductive to engage in publicly. It is best to allow people to express their frustration with a particular situation with you in private. This is part of coaching and mentoring, helping your people to process their frustration. Persevering through the adversity and getting it done will help build the confidence and competency needed to deal with future situations in a more composed and productive way. Your role as leader is to lead by example and to help people through this process, knowing that the future male or female leaders may have a different emotional response to certain situations, and that it is the leader that needs to be understanding and flex their approach to suit the person in need. More on this later. The leader must behave consistently with very high ethical standards. A commitment made is a commitment kept. A leader is not immune from criticism. You must be open to constructive criticism from subordinates, welcoming it with a spirit of gratitude as an opportunity for improvement. This should be formally incorporated into the performance review process, where the subject of the review is provided an opportunity to give feedback on the organization and leadership. This is not hard to do if the prerequisite behavior of gratitude for critical feedback on the part of the leader has been observed. A simple request for feedback on the part of team members during performance reviews is a good place to start. A behavioral inventory can be used as a prompt for this kind of discussion. Leading by example is hard. Recognize and accept your flawed human nature, humility and emotional intelligence, but do not be complacent about it. Perseverance. The leader should strive to be on a trajectory of improving their competency as a leader, building on strengths, reducing and eliminating flaws, knowing that perfection will never be attained. Leading by example is critical to building coherence, cohesion in your team, connection between you and the team and between teammates, competency of your leadership skills and technical skills. Success in leading by example will start a positive resonance that increases energy levels. Collins makes a great metaphor, the flywheel. The idea is that by incrementally adding momentum and velocity to a flywheel, eventually breakthrough velocity can be achieved. Leading by example is essential to these incremental increases in momentum. 2.4. Closing. In conclusion, there are a few things that simply must be done to drive quality of action. 1. Getting the right people on the bus. 2. Codification and communication of values, mission, and vision. 3. Leading by example with respect to values and mission. 4. Strategic planning. Planned actions that are consistent with values, mission, and vision. 4a. Part of the value in planning is being prepared to change with the situation changes, making adjustments in real time. Appendix 1 and 3 present models of generative aligned action, and some big ideas above fit into those more abstract formulations. There are 2 direct outcomes from the above: high quality planned action, Q; highly engaged team members, E. See Appendix 1 and 3.